Okay, so continuing with where we left off. So we're in chapter 3 of part 2, Ishmael as a symbol of man's limitations. So, in fact, as I said before, there's an allusion to the future in the word Ishmael, but which should have actually been Shamael. God has heard, but because and I've explained why it's in the future. Okay, so. And then what happens is another allusion to this in one of the parashiot of the Torah. So in Devarim 32:21, which I think is Haazinu, it says there, that's just before the Torah ends. It's the second last parasha of the Torah. It says there, they enraged me with a non-God. They angered me with their nonsense. And I will enrage them with a non-people. With a despicable nation, I will anger them. So because we go off the derech and we basically enrage God, the reciprocal action is that we will be enraged. We will be attacked and enraged and made to suffer by what the words that are used there are non-people. So, and a despicable nation. So the Rambam Nachmanides basically says that the word non-people refers to a people that cannot develop a society fit to be called a nation because they are not organized as a nation. Rashi basically says that the non-people is a people without a name. Okay, but you can just see, all the other exiles, we were basically exiled by very, very powerful nations. We were exiled by the most important or the top nations in the world. But this exile is different. Now, those people had clearly defined national identities: the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, and they dominated us. But the current exile that we're suffering now, we're at the mercy of a gang of murderers, who are, as we know, called terrorists. They don't have a name. They're not part of a nation. They're just a gang. Okay. So again, you see that this is unbelievable. That's exactly what's happening today. And why did it happen? Because for 70 years, the government that was running the country basically turned to heresy. So again, it validates the pasuk which says, they angered me with their nonsense, and then I will anger them with their non-people. So really, that's a midah keneged midah response in time. Okay. So, and again, it points to something that cannot be concluded. Something that cannot be negotiated, something that cannot be finalized, because we are dealing with we can't make peace treaties. We're dealing with people who's fanatical, and who basically their end game is basically all or nothing. Okay, so diplomacy, ceasefires, none of these things are going to work. And not only that, you don't know who to deal with, because there's so many factions. You've got Fatah, you've got PLO, you've got the Islamic Jihad, you've got Hezbollah, so it's just compounded by the fact that there are so many different groups, and although they do coordinate sometimes, it's just impossible to resolve this. So therefore, again, it comes to a similar conclusion. We're never going to sort this problem out without divine help. It's just not going to happen, because these people are not interested in making peace or in making any kind of concessions. They want a fight to the death, and normal physical, military, technological means, unless you go into a genocidal kind of war, which clearly is against the values of the Jewish people, and we would never do. There's no solution to this. So now we're on to chapter 4. So chapter 4 is entitled "The Ishmaelite Exile as a Means to Increase Faith." Okay, what this chapter refers back to? It refers back to King David talking about being at the mercy of the Ishmaelites. But the question we've got to ask ourselves is, where does Ishmael's merit come from? So I alluded to it a little bit earlier on, but now I'm going to go into the detail. So Ishmael has many merits, and this is why we have to be very careful. Okay, the first merit is he has the merit of circumcision. It's not a proper circumcision. There's a part of the circumcision which Ishmael does not do, which the Jewish people do, but still there is circumcision, and that is a merit. It's a very strong merit, because you'll see later on how that affects us, that merit of circumcision. Then there's the merit of his ancestors. I mean, Ishmael's ancestor was Abraham. Abraham, great man, and we, to this day, we still pray that the merit of Abraham will protect us. So if it's going to protect us, it's also going to protect Ishmael. Then there's also the merit of their faith. They have faith. They pray 5 times a day. It's a big, big merit, that. Okay? And then, of course, they have the merit of the trait of hospitality, as we do too, but they in them it's very, very strong. So it doesn't matter, they're always going to welcome you with bread and water in their home, and when you're in their home, you're under their protection, and nothing will happen to you. So, and of course, that's also why the Ishmael is the only other part of humanity that has the word Adam, that is still called Adam. So these merits actually make Ishmael very hard to defeat. Very, very hard to defeat those merits. So and here again, Rabbi Chaim Vital, which was about 600 years ago, says, "We are lost as to what to do. We have no hope but to trust in His great name. May He be blessed, that He may save us from their hand." Okay, but and then the sages talk. Then of course they say that prayer. You can change your mazal, you can change your future, you can change decrees by prayer. But there's something which is actually even stronger than prayer, and in fact that's the actually Torah commandment and that's to cry out. To cry out, is when we cry out to Hashem as a moan, as a response to suffering, that has a big effect. And in fact, when we left Egypt, what started the whole thing was the fact that we cried out to Hashem. That was the beginning of the redemption. There's also a story about crying out. That was also what started the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, was a cry issued by, I think it was Lot's daughter. Yeah. So again, we see that the nation of Israel has tried all the options. And we've tried war, we've tried peace, we've tried diplomatic activity, we've tried economic pressure, we've tried extensive international public relations efforts, and to explain our situation, and to sometimes justify why we have to go to war. But it's, you can see it's not working. So basically, this is the conclusion of this chapter, is that really, in the end, we're going to have to turn to Hashem for help. And somehow, with Hashem's help, we'll be able to solve this problem. And we'll see later on, possibly, how that's going to happen. So now, chapter 5, and I'm going to go through that quickly. What's happened is that the source of the conflict, as we said, was started with Ishmael and Yitzhak. And basically because the two of them were basically vying for divine favor. This is chapter 5. And what happened is that when they were younger, the two of them actually argued about it. Ishmael said to Yitzhak, "Look, I'm much more committed to Hashem than you are, because I had my Brit Milah at the age of 13. So I was conscious and I suffered, and I still did it. Whereas you had it at 8 days, which is when you don't even remember it." So then Yitzhak replied and said that he was prepared to sacrifice himself for God, and that's when the Akedah started. That's when the events that led up to the Akedah started, which was basically a continuation of that story. So, and of course, what the Muslims have done is they've adopted the Aqidah, but switched the roles around, switched the personalities around, and made Ishmael the one who sacrificed himself. He was prepared to sacrifice himself with his life for God, and they use that. This is how they can do suicide bombing. This is how they can go on to missions where they're not meant to come back, where they're meant to die, because they use that as an ideal for them to live out their life as religious men, in the ideal of that, which we don't, of course, we don't do that. We don't accept that. We don't see that as being the moral of that story. But that's what they do. Okay, so so that basically explains chapter 5, and I'll finish there. And so that's part 4. I'll continue with part 5 later on, but at least now you've got 4 parts to look into. And as I said, this is still all background, and we're going to get into some of the solutions at some later stage. But this background is important, and it's also important to see what the sources are in the Torah, so they can give us guidance in terms of how to deal with things in the future. So I think that this will be my last one before Shabbat. So Shabbat Shalom, and I'll continue with this from next week.